In Typeform, you can collect partial responses even before someone's submitted your form using a partial submit point. Just click to add content and select the partial submit point from here. Then drag and drop to choose where you want to collect partial submissions. And just a couple of callouts here. You can't put a partial submit point before the first question or after the welcome screen, since there's nothing really to submit at that point. You also can't put one at the very end of your form, since at that point, your form is already about to be submitted. You also can't currently use one if you have a payment question in your form. I'd suggest putting your partial submit point somewhere where you're collecting key information, like after a contact info or email question. Every question before the partial submit point will be submitted once the partial submit point has been passed. So in other words, once those two questions have been answered. And depending on your plan, you can add more than one partial submit point in your form. You can even add partial submit points to forms with logic and branching. Just make sure that the partial submit point is before the branching. Here I am in workflows. And for example, if you put a partial submit point here, you'll collect the data for all respondents. But if you put one here and respondents go down a different path, then you can't collect those responses as partial submissions. Okay, so let's publish our form and see how it works. So here, for example, if the respondent answers the NPS question and the email question, and then abandons the form, we'll still get their answers to the first two questions in our results. Here, you'll be able to see whether the response is partial or completed. Keep in mind, partial responses will count towards your response limit. If the respondent ends up filling in the entire form, their full dataset will be completed in their response entry. If this happens in the same browser session, so for example, they've switched tabs to do something else, and then they go back and fill in the form, this won't count as another response. For more information about submission count and using partial submit points in your workflows, integrations, and follow-up messages, check out the Typeform Help Center. Don't miss the point with Typeform.